This is the narrated PowerPoint, Functional Communication, a Situational Perspective.
All right, so now we come to the last article. That's one by Lloyd Bitzer, who's very well known in communication studies, and he writes about this idea of the rhetorical. When we have a rhetorical situation, and how it can be characterized, and further successfully manipulated. So he's saying when the physical environment jars us with unexpected, sometimes cataclysmic events, we respond by adjusting ourselves to the environment to ensure our safety or contentment. And so, for example, if there's a hurricane, we might get into our car and drive off somewhere where there's not a hurricane, so that we'll be safe. Well, it has other applications as well. Let's say, for example, that you were in the hospital for a period of time, and when you got out, there was a charge that you disagreed with. Um, that you could also regard as being, let's say you're being charged thousands of dollars for something your insurance isn't covering, then that you could consider that as well to be something that is cataclysmic. So what Bitzer writes about here and theorizes is this idea of a rhetorical situation. How do we know that we have one? Well, we have a problem. We have an audience, we have a set of constraints. So our problem would be the big insurance or the big medical bill. The audience, so we have to construct the audience. Who's our audience going to be for this? Well, we could say our audience would be, let's say that you had something like ambulance transportation that wasn't covered because your insurance company didn't have any type of agreement with that ambulance company. Okay, so you have different audiences at play here. You have your insurance company who didn't pay for something. You also have another audience, which would be this ambulance company that wants to charge you for transportation. And then you have a set of constraints, which, there's the Bitzer lists, this could apply to, in general, some things like images and laws and so forth um, aren't going to apply, but we do have objects. We have an ambulance that was used, for example. We have an event, some transportation between hospitals or medical facilities and people. Certainly, we get emotional, and it is something of an argument. We have financial interests. Um, One that I added here was policies. The insurance company had a policy that they don't have any type of relationship. They won't pay for this ambulance company because it's out of network, something like that. So, so these are some of the ways in which we know we have a rhetorical situation. Now, what can we do about it? Well, what Bitzer says that we should do, and I was the one who had the emphasis to creative, because the creative task is to discover and make use of the proper constraints in the message. You might say, well, we weren't given any type of choice over which ambulance company that ambulance provider was going to transport us between hospitals or something like that. Um, and so what you're doing is trying to bring about change by uh, stating the facts and trying to show how why the insurance company should go ahead and pay for this ambulance, even though it was their policy keeps them from doing it. So he also brings up this term exigence, and an exigence is basically a kind of an emergency type of situation, or one which requires action of some sort. So, um, in this case, certainly we have an exigence. Anything that needs an ambulance certainly is an emergency type of situation, had to be treated immediately, and now we're trying to get some remuneration for the charge. Bitzer also brings up the idea that there could be spurious situations. Um, in this case, like for example, the one that politicians do this all the time. They'll do this when they should be doing other things um, at times. So one that comes to mind is back in the 90s when the economy was in poor shape. A lot of people felt that Congress should have been doing something. They were arguing about whether or not there should be an amendment to keep a constitutional amendment to keep the flag from being burned, making it against a violation of the Constitution for the American flag to be burned. Well, it's not nice to ever really to see an American flag be burned, but to make it a constitutional amendment would go against the idea of freedom of expression, which is also guaranteed to us by the Constitution. So yeah, it was a somewhat spurious situation when you're trying to introduce something that isn't really going to go anywhere, but it takes up time and it keeps people from addressing things that they would rather not address. So let's try applying some of these ideas to the workplace. Is a set of instructions rhetorical? Um, if we have something that's new and unfamiliar, then certainly the physical environment could have been jarred to some extent. If we don't, if especially if it's something that we don't know how to use, we've never encountered before, or it could just be something that's perhaps something that could be dangerous to operate, such as a chainsaw. So, in terms of whether or not there's a rhetorical situation, is there a problem? Yes, there could be with either of those two instances. Do we have an audience? Yes, we would have people who would uh, be using the device, whether it's a remote control or a chainsaw. And then we do have sets of constraints. And the idea of sets of constraints could play in with audience. Of course, we have the users, or the people who would buy the object, who are an audience. And we could also have a secondary audience who might be lawyers who would examine the instructions if somebody were to get hurt while using, say, the chainsaw, for example. So, and we may have other types of issues such as images and that may be pertinent, such as good illustrations and things like that, with a set of instructions. And the idea of risk could certainly come into play as well. So, all these are ways in which we can construct workplace documents through approaching the document as a rhetorical entity.